Hello, it's after dark. It's actually NX after dark, and welcome. We finally managed, after a long night on my behalf, I finally managed to finish the data access layer for the first feature. So today we'll be looking into generating an Angular feature library using NX. We're going to need some more parts later, but I want to get the feature library in place first, and then we can start to later look at something like workspace lint rules, like lint rules for boundaries between the architectural layers, and something like a shell library for our application. But first, let's put a feature library into place, and then we can have an easier time discussing how to make a more structured approach to an Angular workspace. Hello, Jordan. Nice to see you. How are you doing? Okay, we're still working on this Energy Insights app, and we're getting close now. I think we have the HTTP client in place. At least we merged the pull request for that, and we have the data access using the state management using the NgRx Component Store, which also manages the side effects for loading the data. Thank you, Jordan. I'm happy you like these sessions. Now my problem is I'm running out of stream time on my free StreamYard subscription. So, but yeah, it's pretty. The licenses are pretty expensive, so I don't know really what to do. If I hit 20 hours, I'll have to wait until the 16th of June to start streaming again. So that would be a shame. Okay, so we are what we're trying to do is we want to visualize data like this, something like this: the CO2 emissions on the electricity grid in Denmark for the coming, the current day and the following day, because that's where we have forecast data available. As we can see now, there's still some good wind, not as good as yesterday in Denmark, but we're just below 80, according to the forecast, 80 grams per kilowatt hour produced. 80 grams of CO2 equivalent emitted by the power production. But as soon as we hit 3 o'clock, there will probably be close to no wind, because then it'll be more, there will emit more pollution, more greenhouse gases into the air. And right now we're at 47% wind power, because there's no solar when it's dark. And as we also can see here on the live map, we are producing 1.2 terawatts of wind power. And there's actually, what is this, like 900 megawatts of regular traditional power plants. They're using coal, and some of the smaller ones are probably using natural gas. So, of course, we want to stay clear of those, but it depends on the weather. Now we have no sun because it's night, and the wind is blowing, but it seems like that's going to stop according to the forecast, right? Let's look at our exchange with other neighboring countries. We are importing a lot from Norway. We're also exporting more than that to Germany and Netherlands, and also exporting here from eastern Denmark to Germany. But we're importing a lot from Sweden as well, 1.5 gigawatts. So Denmark is kind of a connection hub between the Nordics and the continental European electricity grids. So we're always expanding our capacity in our high voltage grids. Okay, let's go to the code. Let's go look at the code. We have this workspace. It's called Energy Insights. It's on public open source on my GitHub repo. We have our GitHub workflow that we set up initially for testing, building, and linting the code. We have an Angular 12 app, but we didn't do much except we extracted some root level libraries so that we are left with a tiny, what I call the tiny Angular application project. There's still something we can do here, but that'll be for later episodes. So what do we have here? These are the root level libraries I was just discussing, the assets, environment, styles, libraries. And in the CO2 domain, we have now this data access library, and it is exporting a CO2 forecast domain interface. It should really be in its own domain library. We'll look at why later when we have some more libraries. And we're also exporting the CO2 forecast store. There are more classes in here, like especially this this service, the HTTP client for this public data set. But that doesn't have to be publicly exposed to other libraries. It's an implementation detail about this data access library because it's being used by the CO2 forecast store, which is using NgRx Component Store for its implementation. And it just has this one public property called forecast $. That's an observable that components can subscribe to. And as soon as it's initialized, the service, it will trigger this side effect of initially and then every minute fetching new data through the HTTP client. So that's where we're at. Let's have a look here at the dependency graph using NX. Looks like so. So as we can see here, we have some disconnected libraries right now. These we're going to manually attach to the app project later. And if there's any feature library depending on them, there won't be right now. Because they contain static assets, static files of like images and style sheets. So there's no TypeScript file, source file referencing them. So NX is unable to figure out that the app library actually depends on these two. So we have to set up that dependency, that connection, or those connections. We'll do that later once we start working in the app again. And this is what we have been working for a while as well. This is the data access library for the CO2 domain, and then a utility library for date times. We introduced the Luxon datetime library with its 3 types: the interval, the datetime type, and what was the last one? Not something we've used yet, but there was a third one. Can't remember right now. But yeah, this will probably become a shared library later, but we should, or we can choose, like I've done here, like keep it as local as possible at first until we're actually starting to reuse it. And then we'll also get better at moving libraries around and seeing how that works and looks like with NX. So what are we going to do today? We're going to make the libraries that are going to connect the data access library to the app library, or the app project rather. So that's going to be a feature library. Maybe there will be a UI library as well, but definitely a feature library which will sit between data access and the application. And eventually we will probably even have something between the feature library and the application project. Okay, that was it for the overview. I'm also still using Wallaby.js, a paid product. It works for, I'm using VS Code, but it works for all major web editors like WebStorm also, and Atom, I guess. And yeah, it's really something I highly recommend. I've been using it for many years. It's my tool of choice. It gives me these quick inline feedback on tests. and is really fast at keeping them running and keeping them hot in the background. So let's close all of this down. Let us generate a library. We're using the novel Angular package. We're using their library schematic to create an Angular library. It will be called, what should it be called? Feature. So we're using the feature prefix to indicate it's a feature library. And then it will be called, it's called forecast, because it will be in the CO2 grouping folder. So it's the CO2 forecast feature library. That's the way this works. So we can see here, this is the dry run. So that means NX console, by the way, the extension I'm using here, is running it without creating the code, but creating the virtual file tree behind the scenes. So I can see here, this will create a files or a folder called feature forecast inside of the CO2 grouping folder, inside of the libs root level folder. And these are the files that it's going to create. A lot of configuration, then this public API file called index.ts, which exposes classes and values and functions to other libraries in our project. And then it's auto-generating an Angular module. And I recommend keeping this one for a feature library. So we'll see what that can look like. It's also adding configuration to package.json. I don't know why, actually. Must be a bug, but we'll figure it out. Workspace JSON will have a project entry with the targets, the test and the lint targets for this library. NxJSON for the tags we have to remember to add as well. tsconfig based JSON, that is going to be the path mappings, which will define how other libraries can import from the entry point of this library. And the entry point is this index.ts file. What else we have? Oh, it's adding a recommended extension to VS Code extensions JSON. I think it already did that. Jest config, so it's also updating the root jest config, because in an NX workspace, the jest config in the root will list all the different jest configurations in the projects. We can also see here an overview of our projects. And now I'm starting to notice again that they are not sorted alphabetically, which is why I usually add a script for that. We'll do that some other day. But here we can actually go, for example, the data access library we have created. You can see the targets here. So we could run the test, or we could run the lint task or lint target rather for this library. Same for the app, but it has some more options, and including the different configurations that are available here. Production build, development build, production serve, the development server, and the development build using the development server from Webpack. So this is where we're at, and looks like this is exactly what I want. Now I just have to remember to add some tags to this library. So let's do that. We're using the energy prefix for the Energy Insights app. So that will be the prefix of directives and components. And down here, it's strict by default, strict TS configurations, TypeScript configuration, and strict Angular compiler configurations, especially for the strict template type checking. So let's add the tags. That's the third thing we need to add here, other than the name and the directory. So we'll have a scope that is CO2, and we'll have a type of the library, which is a feature. We can add any tags here, and we don't have to add these tags. We'll see later why they come in handy, these tags, because then we can add workspace lint rules, defining how the different layers can interact, and the domains. So yeah, this should be it. Let's generate this library now. The forecast feature, the CO2 forecast feature. And here we see it in the project overview. And we should be able to see it here as well in the Explorer. Here it is. And I wonder what it's trying to install. I have a sip of water. Excuse me. Okay. Okay. Let's quit that. It should be fine. These are the changed files. Let's review down here. Didn't change anything in package.json. tsconfig base JSON. This is where the path mappings are. See, it added this entry. Stop that. So we will move that up here so that it's sorted alphabetically. Stop that. NgCC, always causing trouble. And here's our project configuration. Where is it? Here it is. And I also want to keep this one alphabetically sorted, but I'll add a script for that later. This will help me out, for example, in the NX console to find a project down here. But we could also use the run targets here. So I could, for example, say I want to test a project, and then I can filter. This is a good way. I wish there was a filter here, because at some point we'll end up having many, many projects. At least the alphabetical sort will help, because they're prefixed with the domain, usually in the project names. Okay, and finally, let's look at the root just config, and this one I will sort manually for now. Good, let's look at the README file. So this is the CO2 forecast feature. I don't really want to add anything, any description to that. I'll just like it. This is for internal use. But yeah, I don't know. You could add whatever in here. If you're a big team or multiple teams work in this repo, it might make sense to add some more here. Maybe even a public API reference or something like that. Or at least a description of what's going on in this. What can you do in this library? Okay. Seems like that's good for now. Yeah, and the index TS file, stop that NgCC. The index TS file here is exporting this feature Angular module. And the only thing I'm going to change here is I don't want the common module. And let's also get rid of the imports. We can actually delete all the options altogether. So it's just an empty decorator factory here with no options passed. Good, so that's our commit. Generate CO2 forecast feature. With that, let's have another look at the dependency graph now to see how that project turns out. Here it is. So that's here. It has the scope of CO2 and the type of the feature. It's a feature library. And now we're going to implement it, and then we will see how NX is able to detect that it will be connected to the data access library, which it will depend on. And we're going to use it in the app project. So that's going to depend on this feature library. And then we'll start to see our layered architecture here. All good. Leading up to some actual code now. And what do we need? What I want is, well, we're going to get this time series. And of course, I want to display that somehow. We could use a table. We could use a chart. So what should we do first? We could create a very simple table because I'm going to use AgGrid for both if I wanted a table, but also it has a chart library. There's a community edition of AgGrid that I want to try out. I haven't really used AgGrid before, but looks like it's very mature and it keeps coming up in our analysis for different companies. So yeah, I'm going to use that, but first let's just try to make a simpler implementation, maybe just a list to see that the data flowing in and being updated. Then we're going to add AgGrid. So in a feature library, what do we have here? In the feature library, you're definitely going to have some what's known as smart Angular components. Could be a page component, could be a container component. Most likely, there's going to be at least one routed component. And those are all examples of smart components. So we could use the NX console, the generator for our generators, to add modules. Oh, there's nothing being listed here, but there are. Yeah, I guess I would have to, if I want Angular's own schematics to show up here. Let's do that for fun. We're going to add to the development dependencies, add schematics /Angular. Okay, PNPM is unhappy. I must have messed something up when I was upgrading it earlier. Or the log file is maybe old or something. Oh, by the way, why didn't you tell me I pushed something to the main branch? That's bad practice. We're going to use a feature branch. So luckily I haven't pushed this. I'll roll back the latest commit, and then we're going to branch out from the main branch. Add that commit again. Push the branch to GitHub. And you know what? I'm going to do go into debugging mode here, or troubleshooting mode, delete the node modules, and then the log file, and give it a fresh start. That's, you have no idea how many issues that is, or that usually fixes things. So deleting the log file and the node modules and doing an install again. And luckily PNPM is pretty quick, even though my internet connection is relatively slow these days for some reason. Okay, while we're waiting, I just got a message from Craig, who's creating the NX.NET plugin. Says that he's been working here on the docs. So looks good. Congratulations on that, Craig. Let's look here. Okay, there is a dark mode. Let's disable this dark reader and use the actual dark mode. Looks similar. Okay, docs using Docusaurus. think there's an NX plugin for that actually. Okay, NX.NET Core, NX Doc, NX.NET TypeScript. Why is there an NX Doc? Generate docs. Okay, interesting. I'll have to try this out at some point. Yeah, so in an earlier episode, I was, I think it was actually the first one of NX After Dark. I tried it out, NX.NET, and it's really great, even at this early stage. I didn't find, I found a few issues, and Gregory fixed them like within the same day before I could even, yeah, I said on my live stream that they were issues, but he had already fixed them. So that was great. I'm using .NET at work and have been using it for many years, along other programming languages. So yeah, I really, it's already a better experience than the .NET CLI itself, because you have to remember all the commands and run them manually. I like this, that you can use the NX console, and then you get the dependency graph, and you get smart builds and smart tests, and so on. So yeah, great project. If you're into .NET, this is worth a look. And as I mentioned, I have a video on that in this YouTube channel. Okay, PNPM is done. Updated something, so let's log the dependencies. And just for good order, I'm going to restart Wallaby so that it doesn't have any issues. Where did it go? Wallaby console. Did I not start it again? Maybe I didn't. No. Okay, here it is. Starting up. Starting the Wallaby app in the background, and should be running the tests. Yes. Here we go, and now it's keeping them hot. All passing. Good. Okay, so I wanted to install the schematics for Angular. Because now when I use NX console to generate, I will also see all the Angular schematics that are included by default. So now there's one for modules, there's one for components, and so on. And the good thing here is now I can see visually all the options, which makes it easier to set defaults in my, let's see, that's in the workspace JSON. At the top, I have my defaults for generators, as NX calls it generators, Angular calls it schematics. Same thing, basically. And I already have a few defaults here for, I don't know why it keeps adding this novel Angular component defaults, because there is no such thing. There is not a component generator in the novel Angular package. Okay, so we could use this for generating modules and components, but I'm so used to doing it all manually, so I'll probably be doing that. Okay, first thing we're going to need is I am using the model view presenter pattern, so I'm doing container components and presentational components. So first thing we're going to need is some sort of a container component. So I'm going to use single file components. So I don't really need folders because there will only be one file and maybe a test file as well. So let's call this the CO2 forecast component, or let's see, container, maybe. No, call it actually. do forecast container.sfc for single file component. And here I'm going to make it an Angular component. Name the class CO2 forecast container. Is this really what I want, by the way? Yeah, that's good for now. Can change it later. We're going to need a selector, and it will be NrG forecast. I'm going to need change detection on push. We will have template, and it will be an inline template. Even our styles will be inline. For example, well, we're always going to start with post display block, but we're actually also going to make view encapsulation and make it, let's make it none, or view encapsulation none. From Angular core. All right. Selector. View encapsulation. Wrong. Oh, it's just called encapsulation for some reason. Anything else? No, not for now. Not for now. Okay. Should end with suffix component. Okay. Call it container component. Okay, now you're happy. Good. One last thing. We're also going to add the module here, so it's going to be a single file component, also within a SCAM, single component Angular module. We'll call it the CO2 forecast container SCAM, and it will declare this component. That's why I'm putting it below, because it's going to refer to the class above. It's going to export. Not if you wanted to route it, but in the initial version, we might not want to add the routes for now. So for that case, we're going to export it instead. Exports. We're probably going to need some imports, and since this is a container component, we're going to use probably the async pipe. So we're going to need the common module for that. And that's it. That's our starting point here in a single file. We're going to then to export that module, that SCAM. CO2 forecast container SCAM. So this feature module is going to be forwarding the same exports as this SCAM has. So that will be one component. That's the whole purpose of a SCAM. Good. What is it complaining about? Appears and exports, but itself has issues. No, there are no issues. What are you talking about? Probably just Angular language service being weird. Yeah, this is our starting point. Here we installed the schematics. We'll put that in a add Angular schematics. Put that in a separate commit. Now write the CO2 forecast container component. There we go. And yeah, so technically it might be a good idea to also export the component since it's a component that might show up. Like you might want to have the type in other libraries, but also let's wait until that's needed. Let's just keep the module for now as an export. So what should we? Yeah, we could add it to the app already. So we will delete all this main content here. Keep the rest for now. What do we have left? Flex header. Main. Going to remove most of this. Take this one for now. Energy Insights. This title. We have the NX logo. Welcome to Energy Insights. Then let's organize this a bit. Yeah, so I'm actually going to here in this component file, I'm going to create a scam for this app component. It doesn't need to be exported, but this is where we're going to import this container scam. Was called like so. Just not component, but scam. See if it can auto detect. It can't. Okay. It's TypeScript server not updated right now. And we'll do it manually. Energy Insights feature forecast. Oh, we don't have access to this scam. Yeah, okay. This will be the entry point. This container forecast container is the entry point of our app, and we gain access to that using this feature Angular module. That's what we're going to importing here instead. Good. Now this app scam, we're not going to declare the app component here, but we're going to import the app scam and delete providers, move Bootstrap up here, and we're good. And now we should be able here in our app template to use the NrG CO2 forecast. What we call it? CO2 forecast. Like so. And let's restart, I don't know, TS server maybe. Should be picking this up. Let's try to build it, or maybe just serve it and see if there are any issues. because it should be good at this point. Oh, the Angular compatibility compiler. Okay, good to see you, Jordan. See you another time. So it looks like it is good. Here's our app. Gone. Are there any errors? Strangeness. It's not happy about something. App scam. App module. App scam. Declarations. Exports. Do I need to export it? No. No, that wouldn't make sense. It's only being bootstrapped. That is strange. So is it not happy about the scam here? Maybe not, for some reason. That would be strange. Let's try it here without an app scam. See what happens. Okay, that was not the issue. What is going on, Angular? Energy CO2 forecast. Energy CO2 forecast. Why does it say that I'm having issues here in this one? I don't understand. Angular, are you putting limitations on me? I will get angry with you. Okay, let's externalize the scam to a separate file and just for funsies. And also call it the boring module suffix, so we have no idea which kind of module it is. Here in the feature module, let's refer to this new module, which is a scam. All right. Still failing. Okay, what on earth is going on? If I leave out this CO2 forecast component, what's going to happen? Will it render? Nope. Okay. What if I remove this forecast feature module? What's going to happen? Still, okay. So is something messed up in the app component in its template or something? I don't know. I'm going to have to roll back to the app project to get hopefully a working state. That is so strange. Okay, so this is the generated app project. Okay, so that works. That works. So when will it break? Let's keep it over here with our live reload. And now I will remove all of this main content. Still happy? Good. Then I'll remove some styles that we're not going to need anymore. Still good? Yes. Okay. Changing the title. Sure, some of you can have spotted whatever I did wrong earlier. Now let's temporarily stage this. Let's go into, let's try again this of creating an app scam. That's how I like to roll. And I still don't know what I did wrong, but exports, nope, imports, and we need the CO2 forecast container. No, we need the CO2 forecast feature or something. Remove these paths. Those are not the right path. Maybe that was what's going wrong. It should be imported from the feature module from feature forecast. Okay. Declared by more than one ng module. Yes, that's right. But we'll fix that. Here we go. Failed to compile. Why? Let's start over with the development server. Here we go. So probably it was just the developer server being confused by me changing the root module around. Okay, so now we can rename this one to be the app.sfc for single file component and update this path here as well. Good. Very good. So now let's go out here. Yeah, let's maximize our editor again. It's really hard to work at this high zoom level, but since I only have a free StreamYard license, I only have 720p. So I really have to have it this big for you to be able to see it somewhat clear. Okay. Moving this inside of the single file component class and renaming it to this, well, a scam, container scam, and deleting this separate module file, referring to it here in the feature module. like so. Yes. Okay. Now comes the question, can we add it to our app? NrG CO2 forecast. Something is going right. I probably didn't add anything to that container template, did I? No. Here we go. There it is. Let's get this committed. Yeah. This is our commit. Good. Good. Finally starting to work. Now, what do we need? Okay, so this will actually be the scope of providing our what's it called? The store. And we'll use view providers so that it's not shared by any content projected components. It's more of a, it's a narrower scope. CO2 forecast store will be provided here. So every time this container component is instantiated, the CO2 forecast store, an instance will be created. And when this component is deactivated, the component store will also be shut down, destroyed. So that should also disconnect or unsubscribe any observables and subscriptions and so on. Oh, prettier. You really like to tell me how to format everything, don't you? Okay. Okay. So now we have the store. What should we put in our template? We're going to need a presentational component, and then we will provide it with the data. So next up, creating the CO2 forecast single file component. Or maybe even, yeah, that's it. I will copy paste this one, but call it CO2 forecast scam, CO2 forecast component. And it shouldn't have a provider. And let's call it UI in this suffix here, because it's a presentational component. Oh, this import is all wrong. Should be the data access. There we go. Back to the presentational component. There we go. No imports for now. But now we can use this inside of our container. To forecasts. Did I rename them the scam? Yeah, I did. That's what I need. When I import that, now I can use it in the template right here. Energy forecast UI. Good. Let's look at the view. Yeah, still CO2 forecast. So let's take a look here in the element browser. We have our forecast container and we have our presentational forecast component, which has this title right now. Okay. So add CO2 forecast, add presentational forecast component. Here we go. Let's push some commits. Now what do we need? Well, now it's time to think about which inputs would we like in this presentational components. This is where we're going to need that domain object or something similar, depending on, well, the presentational component should think about what would be the easiest for me to display. And domain objects or domain structures and interfaces, at least, should be something that's easy to use. But in some cases, you would want, for example, the container component or a store, a component store or something like that to map it into whatever is. Maybe here we need some special data structure for the whatever chart component we're going to use, that, in this case from the AG grid. But I don't know what that looks like yet. So I'll start by accepting a forecast. Forecast. And now I need the type, right? So I want to see a CO2 forecast here, but that is not exported by our library, and in fact, it's located inside of the data access library. This is not where we want it. I mean, we could just export it, and we might do that for now. But think about this for a second. This is a presentational component, and in some cases, we might want to split this into a feature library and a UI library for the forecast, which has the presentational component. And a UI library shouldn't depend directly on the data access library. So if we pretend that we do have a UI library containing this presentational component, then it wouldn't be allowed to import from the data access library. So that's not a good place for this domain structure. And also, I'm not very happy about this property name. And in fact, it's marking, it's only one date time. It's not the interval of Loxon. So it's not really a good representation of what it is, this data point, because it's actually representing a period in time, a 5-minute interval in this case. So a start point in time and an end point in time. So it should really be an interval. So yeah, that's something to think about. For now, let's at least move it, this domain interface and the collection type outside of this data access library, so that if this presentational component was inside of a UI library, it would still be allowed to refer to this domain class. So let's generate another library, Angular library, call it, what should it be called? It can just be called domain. So but it's inside of a CO2 domain grouping folder. So it's the CO2 domain library. And let's add some tags here. And the scope will be CO2. The type will be domain. So it will only have domain types and domain classes, maybe, probably not. But interfaces and types, enums and data structures, those kind of things. Generate this one. And now we need to go through the whole checking up on whatever was generated. Let's close these down. So now we have the domain library here. Let's go to the README file, CO2 domain library. And let's go look in here in tsconfig base. Sort these, we're sorting the path mappings here alphabetically. And in the jest config, also sorting alphabetically also. And just one change I don't want to add here is this one. This is from the feature library. So generate CO2 domain library. Shut this down. And what are you changing here in this log file? What? I haven't. Why is this happening? Stop doing that. Oh. Why is the generator for the Angular library messing up my PNPM node modules install when it's not adding any dependencies? That's really annoying. Now it has to recreate node modules again. Oh well. Okay, so we have now our CO2 domain library. So let's pull out this CO2 forecast interface and collection type, move it inside of here, delete the folder it came from, then delete that auto-generated module. We're not going to need an Angular module inside of this domain library. And in the public API, the index.ts file, we will export everything from CO2 forecast. Okay, that is good. Now the files that were referring to that forecast, let's try to find them. Here, CO2 forecast, it's not there anymore. Now let's restart the TS server, which we usually need after generating a new library. And then we can import from domain, CO2 domain, CO2 forecast. Good. Are we referring to it in this file? Nope. Okay, PNPM succeeded. Now there's no changes. Good. Okay. Everything. What did change here? That was probably just some formatting. Don't want that. And I don't want to change here in the forecast component. But the others here, let's build it to see if there's other files referring to that CO2 forecast interface from the old location. And let's also run the tests. Oh, I should wait until NGCC is done. I hate that. Here we go. Okay, let's also run it skip NX cache just to make sure. Oh, I have to do double dash with PNPM to forward parameters to a script. Okay, everything good. Oh, wait. Okay, so it's actually just running. It's not running all the tests. It's only running for one project. So we should do run many target test parallel. That's good. And luckily, I would want max parallel of. I have 12 logical cores, so I could probably use at least 2/3, or at the very least half, but also 2/3 should be good. But that might not be good for the CI. By the way, am I using this script for our CI workflow? That's not good. That's not good at all, actually. Test. PNPM test. Wow, this is bad because it's might have only been running, yeah, for that one app project, so not for our other projects. That is not good at all. Okay, so what would work parallel for the CI? I don't know. We should yeah, fix this later. Here, run me target lint parallel. Okay. CI fix test and lint. And then let's run it locally here. Okay, let's see what's going wrong. All or project. Okay, so I forgot something. Run many target lint and say all. Let's try the PNPM test command now locally. Okay, so now it's running all the tests, and hopefully they're all working, or I have really messed up in previous episodes. Phew. Good thing. Let's also try the lint. So this max parallel is, I think it's 3 by default. That's not really good use of 12 cores, but on the CI server, 3 is probably a good number. So, a linting error here. Oh, right. So there's actually an error here because this should be importing locally or relatively. No, where's that from? We're in the util date times. So where's the zone? Okay, it's probably here. Oh, good thing. If we fix that, good thing we fixed the CI here. Okay, back to what we were really trying to do. Import CO2 forecast. So this seems to be the only import. Okay, so we can say move CO2 forecast to domain library. Yes. And the public API is now exporting that. Very good. Very good. So now let's close all this and open our CO2 forecast component. That's not the component. Stop that. Stop. Oh, I'm really missing out my keyboard shortcuts right now. Go away. No, really, go away. CO2 forecast SFC, single file component. Okay, now we can import the CO2 forecast interface from the domain. And we're using strict settings, strict Angular compiler settings. So it's not really happy about the fact that we're marking this input property as a CO forecast, but we're not initializing it. So at some point, this might not be technical correct, or it isn't. And we shouldn't just be making up something here that wouldn't make sense. But since it's a collection class, actually we could do just an empty array, and we're good. This is one way of solving this issue, but there's another issue that we'll actually see in a moment when we can use this input property in the container component to bind it. Okay, so forecast, and then let's loop over the forecast here. Let's do table and row. Well, start by table header, and inside of here we will have a table dimension or a cell. One for or time, date and time, and one for, let's say, price area, and finally one for, and actually added a second column here, one for the CO2 emission, or rather CO2 grams per kilowatt hour. Yeah, technically, it would be more proper. Grams of CO2 equivalent per kilowatt hour. So let's use that. This is our table header, and we'll have now a table row. I might have messed up the names. Like, is there TH or something? Yeah. What's the difference? I have to look this up. It's been a while. Dear old HTML friend. MDN, the TH element, and an example. TH, TR, TH. Okay, yeah, so we should zoom in. Should be using TH instead of TD in the header. But there could even be a TH for every row if you have an advanced table like this one. But yeah, these ones should be TD instead of TH. And we should actually wrap them in a table row. TH for table header. And here we're going to have 3 times TD. TD. So I don't have emit completion. Strange. I do it manually then. And we're going to loop over using ng4. And to use ng4, we're going to need the command module. We're going to loop over let data point of forecast. Then we're going to say first column here will be data point that minutes 5 UTC, and then the date pipe is just this is a date time, which is not this is the date time from what's it called, Luxon. So this is not supported by the date pipe. So what could we do? I really don't want to. I mean, okay. So as a first step, could be all right to say convert it to the date instead. So that will be to JS date. And then we can pass it into the date pipe. That's a good first step, but I really hate having logic in the template like so. Second cell, data point dot, and it was the emission, and we'll pass it through the number pipe. And then we could format it like, I have to look up the parameters then. Let's do that. Number pipe. It's not called, no, it's called a decimal pipe. But the name is number, yeah. Digits info, see more, okay. So minimum integer digits, yes. 1. Minimum fraction to maximum fraction. Okay. So we would like at least 1 leading digit, and then just 2 decimal points. And this should be a string, so we have to do like so. Good. And then the third cell of each row, we have a data point, and we're taking the price area. Yeah. Okay. Okay. And now let's, we have two things. We could test it as it is right now, or we could connect it to the container component. Let's just, we already have the data, or hopefully if everything works. So let's try that out first in manual testing in the UI just to see. So here in the template of the container component, we're now going to bind to the forecast input property, and we're going to give it our forecast dollar observable property, pass it through the async pipe. And now we have two issues. We don't have this property, and because we're using async pipe, our input parameter has to accept null as a value, because the async pipe will always initially emit a null value. So our input property has to support that somehow, or it won't be, strict template type checking will complain like it does here. Okay, so first let's get that property. So we will, let's define it first. It will be called forecast dollar, the Finnish notation, and it will be an observable of a CO2 forecast. Remember that domain collection type. So a CO2 forecast is a read-only array of CO2 forecast data points. Okay, where should we get it from? Well, let's inject our CO2 forecast store. Should we call it store? Yeah. CO2 forecast store. And remember, this is provided in this container component. So it will follow the life cycle of this container component. So now we can do CO2 forecast. This.co. It's not picking up this forecast. Oh well, it works now. Yeah, this is an observable of the CO2 forecast. Good. So that eliminated one issue. And now we have this. We can't pass a null value because that's not defined by this this input property. But async pipe is always emitting a null value initially. So we could also, either we have to add null as a value that we accept here in the input property, or we do something really annoying like ngIf forecast dollar async as forecast, and then instead of using async, we can do it like so. That's another option, and the downside is now we have conditional rendering in our template. And there's a few other issues with the async pipe as well, like how do we handle errors? How do we handle a completion of an observable? And what if, when we're using ngIf, what if this value was null? What if this value was false? What if this value was any other type of falsy? But you know what? This is an okay solution for, really we should have a better option. A better option could be using a let directive or a push pipe. And a let directive would be good. It is available as part of the NgRx component package, but it's not recommended for production usage. So we could look into the Rx Angular template package instead, where it also is in a more advanced version that has other options and use cases and optimizations. But for now, let's stick to common patterns. Yeah, so let's stick to the Angular packages for this solution for now. This should be okay. So the downside is that this component won't be rendered until we have data in this observable. That's actually not good. Like, it would make sense to start rendering the chart immediately, and then when data becomes available, it will be passed on to the chart. So let's actually look at some other options here rather than having ngF. Go back to the async pipe solution. So like so. So how would we accept null here? Well, we could say CO2 forecast or null. And now we're good, but now we have to make null checks every time we're using that forecast. For example, here. Why is it not complaining? should really tell us that something's wrong here. Like, what happens if it's null? Okay, if we wanted to do it like this way, I suggest we add either we could add a setter, or we have to add a setter. And then we have to add a header as well. And now we have to keep the same type. And we have to add a backing field. And rather than private, I actually prefer to use the private fields from ECMAScript. Forecast. This should never be null, but we can initialize it to the empty array. And this is what we will return from a getter. And in the setter, we can do this dot forecast is and assign it, but now we have the issue, right? What if it's a null? Okay, so one thing we could do is we could say forecast is assigned to empty array if it's nullish. So if it's null or undefined, then we will never have null here. This is one option. It's a lot, a lot of code just for accepting null. And if we have to do that for every input property, it will get a bit annoying, right? But this is actually a proper solution for this issue of accepting null because of stupid async pipe. Another option is what's called input setter type hints. So here we also have a backing field, but we will eliminate this null so that when we're using this, oh, by the way, I forgot to do this. So if we eliminate the null type here, now when we're using it in the template, we don't have, or other places, we don't have to do null checks. But now we have the issue that the types are not aligned between the getter and the setter. But if we remove it here, now we have the issue of the async pipe. Again, let's look in the container template here. Null is not valid in this context here. So another option we could do is we could have a static property called ngAccept input type, then underscore, and the name of the input property, which is forecast, and then give it a type. So the type is then CO2 forecast or null. Let's now see in our container. Now the issue is gone. So I spelled it right. So this is telling NgRx compiler. It's a compiler annotation, like all decorators. This is telling it that you're okay to also pass in null in the setter, even though it's not mentioned here, because now we can make the type of the getter more strict, but Angular is still allowed to pass in null here in the setter. So we still have to handle that, and we're doing it here with this default assignment on knowledge values. So this is, I don't know actually when they introduced this. I think it must have been part of Ivy, so 9 or later, Angular 9 or later. This is an interesting option. Of course, the issue is that if we're using linters that tell us what's the order of properties and so on, when should static properties be present, we have the issue of they're not really following the principle of proximity. This is obviously related to this one. Well, obviously, when we know it, but it's related to this property. It has to keep in sync, like the types and the name. But if we have some linter rules, we're not allowed to move down the static property here next to the setter that it's related to. So this is the downside of this approach, especially when you have multiple input values. Then they all get set more and more apart. But we already had that issue actually with the backing field. We'll have the same issue that they are related in one group by linters, or placed in one group by linters, and the public properties here will be placed in another group according to our lint rules. Okay. Yeah, but this is actually, this is a good solution. Kind of the best of both worlds. We're supporting null, so we don't have any special logic. We don't have conditional rendering in here, and we should be able to handle an empty array. So very good, and simple logic inside of here. So we'll go with this and see how that works like. One more thing, now that I said I'm going to use the private fields, let's not use the private access modifier here. Let's instead add a private member, like so, and assign it from in here, like so. Oh, use before initialization. This whole thing. That's the downside here. I do prefer the ECMAScript standard rather than the made-up TypeScript standard. Also, these private fields or private members, you can also have methods with the hash sign in front of it. They are actually private at runtime. So no one outside of this an instance of this class will be able to access them. So they are actually private, not just at compile time, which is nice. Okay, let's see what we have here. We have, now let's run the formatter just to make sure here. Okay, and then we'll say display, some formatting. We'll add that in a separate commit, but here we'll say display CO2 forecast. Here, that's probably hopefully only formatting. This one, same thing. This is a style format commit. Let's push our commits. And now, if we're lucky, we will actually have a working app. Come on now. Oh. Oh, I forgot there was an export in here. Okay, good catch. Thank you, Angular compiler. Finally doing something useful. Remove broken export. Now, do we have a working app? Let's find out. No provider for HTTP client. I forgot about that old devil that we have to provide the HTTP client module. Okay. So we actually have to add that here in our app module. Like so. And let's run the formatter. Go back to the app and okay, we're sending a request and something is wrong. Might be the probably the URL encoding. But we have our table here, so that's our presentational component being presented or being displayed by the container component, which gives it access to through the CO2 forecast store. We get the forecast, which will then the forecast store will look for data or request for data. And we do have like we have a timer, right, that should trigger after 1 minute. So now the question is, does it handle errors? Yeah, it did. It did. Here it came again with a second request after a minute. So the whole observable flow here is not broken. So now we just have to debug or figure out what's the issue here. And let's go and see the parameter, the query string parameter we have sent here. This is the SQL query. So let's start by looking if this is right. No formatter for SQL. Okay. I'll format it manually. Oh, So here's one issue. Our date time. I mean, this might work, but I would much rather it did like the plus here. Which is a bit odd, because I figured in the tests for the SQL generator, here. Okay, so we have Wallaby, so we can actually do a console log of the SQL output here. See that here it is actually using plus, which is what I want for the UTC offset. But it was being sent like so. And what's the reason for that? Well, I happen to know that the CCAN implementation, which is backing this API, considers plus as a space character, like a single space character. So we would have to further URL encode this plus symbol, I think. So what is the URL encoding of plus? Let's find out. If we have a plus character and we say use the encode URI component global function, and we'll learn that it's actually percentage and then the hex code of 2B. So we might have to, this is something that Angular's HTTP client is not taking care of for us. So inside, let's go back to here to, let's go find our HTTP client. Here it is. And we were trimming something, right? Where were we trimming? Oh, here, SQL. Trim SQL parameter. But also, we also want to URL encode. URL encode. CCAN, no. URL encode. And then we will pass it for the plus symbol here. It will look like this. So that we're not doing a full URL encoding, because HTTP client from Angular should take care of that. But additionally, we will URL encode the plus character here. So let's add a function locally here, call it URL encode. Character. Character will be a string, and text will also be a string, and we'll get a string back. Okay. So here, URL encoded character is encode URI component character here. So this will give us, it was like percentage to B. plus will become %2b. And here, now we'll say this is where we're missing the replace all function, because that is coming to ECMAScript. Replace all. Yes. Here, what's the support for this? Browser compatibility. Well, it's actually in modern browsers already. Yeah, but the issue is, yeah, we should either upgrade our library, our lib. What are they called? Let's go find it. Here, lib ES 2017, and there's probably a bunch of these all over the workspace. Yeah, and some of them, that's quite funny. The root one is ES 2017, but the rest of them is ES 2018. So something went wrong here, NX, because I used the exact same version to generate all of this. Okay, but which version did that come in? String replace all, yes, and yes, probably 2020 or 2021. Oh, here it is. Is it 2021? Yeah, Axel Rauschmeier is usually good at creating posts on new features in the ECMAScript standards. So it's an ES 2021. Yeah, so either we have to do it in every library, which is a bit of a shame. So either here instead of 2017, we can say 2021, or there's a way to do it like on a more granular level. ES 2021, ES 2021. Oh, it's not here yet in TypeScript. Oh. So here we could do it individually with the features. ES 2020 string. Let's try that. And also go to ES 2018. And let's move the DOM to here. And then go do the same thing for all of these places. And yeah, this is what is generated by NX, but now I'm thinking they should work like they're all extending the root. So it should be enough to put it here, as long as we only have an Angular application at least. Because of course the issue is if you're all of a sudden also having a Node.js project, for example, it might have another ECMAScript standard according to, depending on the version of Node.js. But since we're only having Angular projects, we might delete these project-specific configurations. But then we have the issue of every time we generate a library, we have to delete this setting. On the other hand, now we have to keep adding this setting. So maybe we should just let's try that tsconfig base, like having it one source. What is it called? Single source of truth, right? Let's try that. and see if it gives us issues. And then we'll have to remember to remove this lib setting from every generated library. Okay, let's go out to, where were we working here? URL encode character. Try text.replace. Oh, yeah, still we have the issue of it's what was in string features of ES 2020. We should be able to look this up in TypeScript. ES 2020, that's string. Match all. Okay, so if we got this, then it's working. Match all. We didn't get this. Maybe the TS server needs to restart, because we definitely have the DOM. Or is this also part of Node.js? I don't know. Oh, but now we have it. Look at that. Okay, so it's working, but the issue is TypeScript 4.2 doesn't seem to include ES 2021, right? Yeah. What ES next? And does it have specific ones? String? Okay, let's try that. Restart the TS server since we changed the configuration. Waiting. Let's see if we have the replace all now. Replace text that replace all. We do. Great. Great. So, okay. We'll say now that we're using modern browsers. So we'll depend on ES 2020, and in addition, the ES next is string. Which is this one. ES next that string means that we get replace all. Yeah, replace all. There's two interfaces here, two signatures. One where we pass it a string or a regular expression, as well as a replacement value, which is a string, and the other where we can pass it a callback as a replacer function here. Good. This is exactly what we wanted. But now we're limiting ourselves to modern browsers. We could add a polyfill for this, but I'm okay with saying we're only using modern browsers. Okay, but now comes the question, does Jest is running on Node.js? My computer is running Node.js, and but does the Node.js then have the replace all option? I need to figure out here which version of Node am I running right now? 12. I should actually be running 14 since that's supported by at least Angular 12, hopefully also NX 12. And yeah, I'm using this tool called Volta. Node 14.x. So another thing we can do with Volta is we can go to package.json, and we can actually add here a Volta config and say node 14.x, I think. And then Volta will seamlessly switch between versions of Node depending on the project. So, okay, if I do Node version right now, Node. Oh, okay, it's not happy about 14x. So let's say like so. Would that work? Nope. It has to be like so. Oh, what about this? Do I have to specify the exact version? Apparently I do. So let's try that. Node v. Now it's at 1470. Every time I'm working inside of this project folder. Before I was on 12, what was it? 1221. So let's just try that. See that Volta is seamlessly switching between versions of Node. And if I don't have it installed, it will complain. Okay, so let's see, say to Volta, always use Node 1417 in this project. Good. So hopefully that is enough. Hopefully, I actually don't think so, but hopefully Node.js 14 has this ES 2021 API. We'll figure out when we're testing this one. Okay, so what are we searching for? We're searching for the character, and we will replace it with the URL encoded character. Return this. And the issue, if we didn't have text string replace all method, we would have to use a regular expression, and we would have to do like replacement pattern. We would have to do it something like this. URL encoded character. So we could do this instead. This would work with almost any version of JavaScript. It would be using regular expressions, so it would actually be a bit slower and also more code and a bit more noise. So this is not even right. It should be just a character. Yeah. So encoded character. This would work in any version, so that will be our fallback if this doesn't work in tests. Yeah, we're going to add this test. Actually, do that now. URL encode character spec.ts. Open up. Where is the wallaby? I can't see for the camera. Here it is. URL encode. Import from URL encode character. Here's the name. Let's give it a good name afterwards. This is what we want to test here. So character plus text. Say, well, let's take a date time string, or in other words, ISO 8601. take time. And then it will be about approximately the current time in the Danish UTC offset. Actual text, encoded text, will be URL encode and then the character and text here. Okay, now we're seeing this issue here. Text replace all is not a function. So it's not supported by Node 14 and Jest is using Node. So it's a bit of a bummer because that means we would have to add a polyfill to every all the Jest configurations. Maybe we could get lucky that we could add it down here to the Jest preset. I think that's called once per test suite or test project. So is there a polyfill for this? Here it is. But this is for a URL. What about here? npm packages. Okay. Go to npm actually. Search for replace all. Here it is. This is the name. See if we can import it here in our Jest preset. Of course, then we need to install it. Add it using pnpm. Come on. Here we go. And now the question, does it run? Open up here. Where is it? There's Wallaby. Try to stop it. Start it again. The Jest preset is invalid. Okay. Oh, import. So this is using require. So it seems like it's the old common JS syntax. So let's try it this way. Wallaby stop. Wallaby start. Go Wallaby. Yeah, this is modern web dev in a nutshell. Different toolings fighting over everything. Okay. Text replace all is not a function. I would think it would be enough to import it. Let's see here. Place all shim. Oh. Let's try that. Const replace all. String replace all. shim. Let's try again. Wallaby stop. Wallaby start. Still saying it's not a function. Okay, so yeah, this is not my luck. Okay, we'll go back. We'll revert some of this. Remove it here because it's not working with Wallaby. That's my preferred tool. Or maybe I'm doing something wrong. So let's revert to using the old style here. Placement pattern. NgRx the character we want to replace. And G for global flag. Oh, and it will be text replace. This pattern. Replace it with the URL encoded character. And what's going on here? Invalid regex, nothing to repeat. Oh, so when there's a plus sign, we have to, we have to do it like so in a regex. So it's a bit annoying because we would have to do it this way, actually. And even worse, this way when it's a string. Yeah. Okay. So let's go back here to our global or root csconfig and remove this one. And this one should actually also be matching our Node.js version. So let's do ES 2018. So the result should be 7 plus. We should have 2B. Let me try to restart Wallaby here. Oh, yeah, it's not really working with this. URL encode SQL parameter. URL encode plus. Man. All because of missing that string replace function. Okay, but now it's working. Great. like so. But it encodes, URL encodes plus character, and I don't really have time right now to do more tests, so let's go into the HTTP client and here, use it here. Okay, let's what's going on here with Wallaby? Oh, was the console. Never mind. And let's go and remove. Wait, what did I end up doing in this one? Ah, this will only replace the first one. So it's really poor that I didn't make more tests. It URL encodes all plus characters. Coded text. I'll encode plus text coded text to B, and we'll extract this URL encoded plus to here. Or here. Then equals 4 and the URL encoded plus 3 plus 2 plus 1. Now we can see that the implementation is actually not working right now. It's not for multiple pluses, which is very poor. So now we have to go and say, well, URL encoded plus replace all pattern. It'll look like 2BG. Sorry. URL encoded plus. Oh, roll back. Dude, I'm messing up. URL encoded plus. And we can do that only one time for this module. And yeah, this is what we want to replace it with, and this is the replacement pattern. So every time we have a plus, actually all of them, we will replace it. Here we go. Yeah, good. So now it's working. Now it's working. Why is it saying like so? Okay, all good. Do we still have the app running? We do. Let's see what's happening now. Let's close all of this down and reload the app. Okay, something's still wrong. But what about this one? Let's copy. Can I copy the link address? Let me just see what this is looking like. Here's the time, and then seems like it's being double encoded or something. Okay, this is not really working out in my favor. So I'm actually going to roll back everything except Volta. And we're going to continue this some other time because now it's really late. Have to catch some sleep. But don't worry, we'll figure it out next time. For now, my hair is messy. For now, that was it for NX After Dark. See you some other time. Bye.